Welcome. How are you? Sorry to keep you waiting.
Hi, Stan. Preston Hodgkinson, Daily Hive, Edmonton. Goaltending has been a hot topic in the city this season. You obviously decided to stand pat. Just want to know your philosophy on that position deadline.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely a hot topic. I see that's something everyone likes to talk about, and I understand that. I think goaltending, right or wrong, gets the most attention in a game, and I think with our two goalies, probably the last stretch hasn't been their best, and that's probably why there's a lot of attention. But I try to look at things over like the bigger sample, and I think so. If you break it up, we had a slow start to our season, our team included, and I think our goalies didn't get out of the gate strong. And then from November until probably the end of January, I thought our goaltending was really solid. I thought it was, and ever since then, it hasn't been as good, so understandable. But I do think that, last night's a pretty good reference point. I think that's what we can see. I thought Stu made a lot of saves for us. It's an important position, absolutely. We're trying to not put so much pressure on them so that they have to save games for us. And I think we did a good job of that as a team for those stretch of months when our goaltending performed well. I think our team did a good job. I think our team game has escaped us a bit over the last probably 5-6 weeks, and as a result, it puts more pressure on your goalies. So I'd like to see both things have a little bit of an uptick, the goalies' performance, both goalies, as well as our team, and not putting them in the position to have to save games for us. So, I guess that's my quick assessment on where we're at with the goalies.
Moving salary out in this league is a difficult thing to do. Can you kind of talk about the added difficulty of trying to do that with the various no movement clauses throughout the roster?
I guess that's true that it can be challenging to move money in today's game. We have a lot of players that really haven't been as consistent as we'd like. So I guess when you look at the performance of our team, then questions start being asked as far as should you move that player, should you not move that player. I don't know if that was as much of a factor as just our overall team performance wasn't that strong. So I think sometimes more gets made of that than is needed as far as their trade protections. That wasn't a huge factor this week for us.
It was a deadline day where there were a lot of splashes. There were some big names bouncing around. Some came out west here. I wonder what your approach was, Stan. Did you take some big swings at potential splashes, or did you feel like the more conservative approach was the way you were going to have to go?
We talked about a lot of things. I mean, a number of things even today that just didn't really get all the way to the finish line. But I would say that's probably the norm around the league. If you knew everything that might have happened, you'd be surprised. But when you add it all up, we didn't make any additional moves other than the ones that have been announced. There was no added moves today. So not for lack of trying. I think you're trying to balance a couple things with at this time of year. My experience tells you that sometimes you need to improve areas of your team that have shown over 60 games aren't strong enough. Other times you can upset the mixture you have if you bring in 7 or 8 new players. I've done that before, and I found you only have 20 games left. So if you have to incorporate a lot of new players, it can be challenging. So I think we struck the right balance this year as far as the number of new players and where they play. In particular, I think Wallman's a really big upgrade for our group. He's somebody that we've talked about going back to the middle of the year as a big target. And, I've been Mike Greer's probably tired of talking to me about him because I've been told a long time that he wouldn't trade him. I'm not going to trade him. He's got another year. I don't have to trade him. We just kind of stuck with it. And then the other day when we pitched it to him, I think we got his attention, and we eventually got it, to where he came in. So I think that's a big piece that we're excited about. And then, we talked about the desire for our team to have a bit of a different look. I think if you looked at our team as it was before this week, we have a lot of players that are similar up front. They're kind of different versions of the same player. They have different attributes, but for the most part, they're not like Frederick or Jones. Those guys have a much different skill set, and I think it's something that we've been lacking. And as a result, it was an important piece for us to address that. And so we're looking back now on the moves we made, and I'm really excited. I think our staff did a great job. I got to commend them. Put in a lot of long hours with different ideas to get us to where we are today, and I think we're looking really good.
We've seen Chris Knobloch audition numerous players next to Leon Draisaitl on that second line, Arvidsson, Skinner, Podkolzin, and there have been a kind of a revolving door there. What is your analysis of what's available there to you? And when you look at what you've got on your roster here, do you feel like there's something there that still has a chance to stick?
Yeah, it's funny because I do get this question a fair amount too about, Leon's probably the MVP of the league this year, right? And he's going to lead the league in goals, and he's pretty close in points. So, he seems to do it with whoever he plays with. So I think that's a testament to the season that he's having, that he's not relying on just one line mate. He's had a number of different players there. You're right. So who's it going to be going forward? I'm not quite sure yet. I think that we have different options, and I think that's something that's going to, I guess, unfold over the coming 20 games. You're right. I think Podkolzin and Arvidsson have probably spent the most time with him if you look at the numbers. And maybe that's the way it'll be. And if not, we have some other guys that might get a look there too. We have a few new players. I think when Frederick gets in the lineup, we've got to decide if we're going to use him at center or on the wing. Because I think if we're going to play him on the wing, he could play on the top two lines, or if we're going to use him in the middle, he's probably on the third line. So that's a couple weeks away until we're going to know that. But and then Jones had a really good night last night, I thought. Where will he end up? I don't really know that either. But even Kapanen's played a bit with Leon, and Cappy's been great at center the last stretch too. So I think that we do have a lot of options. Now it's for the coaches to figure out which ones are going to lead us to the most success as a team. And
sorry, Matty, just real quick, is that something that you looked at addressing today? Like, did you nibble around trying to find someone for that spot potentially?
I don't know if it was just a spot for Leon per se. We were looking, we were looking at, can we bring anyone else in that would complement this group? And we tried, but it just wasn't a fit.
Hey, Stan. Sorry, Manny. Just want to ask you about the West was always going to be hard to get out of, and then you saw what happened in the Central with Brandon coming in here. And just a thought on that, on the arms race, maybe in the Central Division, the fact that it almost makes trying to win the division even more important than having to go through some of those teams.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is that no matter where you are in the top 8, you're going to play a good team in the first round. It's just the way it is. If you win the division, the wild card team is going to be a really strong team. So no question about it, some teams improved quite a bit now, at least on paper. Now the question is, how does it all come together, with the group they already have? Time will tell. I mean, not every team that looks great now, if we talk in 2 months, is going to look great. Like, sometimes things just don't work. So that's why we play the games. I think if you try to worry about your opponents too much, then you lose sight of what matters. And we've got to do what we do well. And if we play our game well and we play it to the best of our ability, we're a really strong team. And I think we're a stronger team than we were for that stretch when we we were one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the league. So I think we need to get the group that we had here playing back to that level. And then when you add in these new pieces and they integrate, I'm very hopeful and optimistic with the group.
And we all saw the statement on Kane. I was just, what kind of player do you expect to get back, or will he be able to play with you in the playoffs? And what kind of player do you expect to get if he is back in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think a healthy Evander Kane is such a. I'm trying to think of how many guys are like him in the league. There's probably a handful that can play like him with his size, his scoring ability, his intensity, his physicality, intimidation. Pretty small list of guys when he's back healthy, playing at that level. So without a doubt, we want to get him there. And I think the biggest thing is when he's able to play at that level, and he's fully healed, he's ready. So I do expect him to be back at some point. We don't exactly know when that will be. It's not going to be in the regular season. Will it be at the start of the playoffs? I don't know. I think if we can play long enough, he will definitely be back playing for us this year. So, he's got a lot of elements that can be game changing. So I think that's another attribute that we liked with Frederick and Jones is when you look with Evander, with Max Jones and Trent Frederick, those 3 players, that's a handful to handle in a playoff series, and I expect and I hope them to all be there making a difference.
Stan, you got a left shot defenseman in Wallman. Were you looking at a right shot defenseman? And Wallman's a puck mover. Were you looking at somebody who's bigger and has some snarl to play in the top 6?
We're looking for good players, and first and foremost. He's number 1 defenseman on their team, and they've had a tough year. But you look at the way he's performed, to be able to perform at that level on a team that's had it's been a struggle a bit for that team this year. I think it shows you how well he's played. So I love his skill set. I think he's got. He's a big guy. Maybe he's not super tall, but he's 6'1", almost 220 pounds. So he's strong and he can skate, makes plays, very competitive. He doesn't play a passive game. He's involved in the game. I think our forwards are going to enjoy playing with him, whether he's a left or a right. I think sometimes that gets overblown a little bit. I mean, Kulak's played a lot on the right this year, and I think Kulak's had his best year. He's been fantastic for us. So whether Wallman plays on the right or whether Kulak does, I think those are options for the coaches. But I think Jake's going to be a big part of this. So I think to add someone like that, he's a young guy still. He's got more years ahead of him on his contract. So, I think it's going to be a big, big upgrade for the D.
You mentioned about your team can play better. You had a stretch there where they played better. A lot of your forwards have not lived up to last year's standards. Can they just flip the switch and suddenly be playing like they did last year?
I don't know about flipping the switch. I think it's probably more of a process than it is flipping the switch. But I remember sitting in this room when I first started, and I remember saying to the group that the way that sports work is that I think everyone's expectations are everyone is going to pick up where they left off and be just as good or better the next year. And I said, although I hope that's the case, I know it probably won't be. And so we have seen some players they haven't played as well as they did last year. That's a bit the nature of sports, though. And excuse me. I think the fact that it's not a straight line all the time. That whether it's our special teams have been good at times, and I think we've got to find a way, and each player individually has to dig down and find out what is it about their game that was better last year and how can they be better. Sometimes it's just their own individual performance. Sometimes it's who they're with and the way the team is playing. So I don't think it's a matter of flipping a switch. If only it was that easy. I think it's probably a little more nuanced than that, and it requires those players. All they can do is take it upon themselves to be the best version of themselves. And there's certainly room for growth for a lot of our players.
One last thing, you've got lots of players. You've got 24 players now. Is there any thought that you're going to be less than that? I know you're still under the cap, but that's a lot of players, 8 defensemen and extra forwards.
I don't know how you do it any other way. I mean, I don't think this is the time of year where you've only got 4 recalls after the trade deadline, so it's not like you can be bringing a lot of guys up and down. The system is sort of designed to be this way. The roster opens up as of the deadline, so I think every team's probably got 14 or 15 forwards and 8 defensemen. I mean, if you don't, then where are you going to get your players from? So I think it's a competition now. I think it's good to have players looking around to realize that if I'm not on my game, someone's going to take my spot. Maybe that was different earlier in the year when you have a smaller group, but I think now bring your best every night, and if not, then you're probably going to find yourself out of the lineup.
Stan, just over here. I know you guys just put out the statement about Evander Kane. You've been talking about him, but can you say when exactly you came to the conclusion or the determination that he would be out for the remainder of the regular season? And can you describe just how much this has kind of factored into your decisions this year and how difficult it's been to kind of gauge his uncertainty?
Yeah, it's been hard for sure. Very recently, we finally, the goal all along was to try to give as much time as we could for our doctors and our staff to assess his readiness to return. Because some of the complicating factors with Evander is it's not like he has a broken bone where it's pretty obvious. You take an X-ray and you say, okay, it's healed or it's not healed, and the return to play is a little bit more concrete. This situation is different. He had very involved double surgery, and then he had the knee procedure in January, which was really a non. It wasn't like an injury per se. It was just something he had to get cleaned up. But it did set back sort of his training, because when you go through a big surgery like Evander did, there's a couple of phases to it. There's just getting back to doing regular things, and then you could progress that into start to heal and then train, and then now he's beyond all that. Like, he's doing well, but now you got to get into the performance side of it, where you've got to really ramp yourself up to be ready to play in an NHL game where the intensity is super high. So there's certain milestones you have to hit. Now that we know where we are and how much time is left, he's not going to be able to close that gap in that amount of time. So it's still not exactly known. It's not like we know he's going to be ready by this date. We just know he's not going to be ready by the end of the regular season, which is why it became clear that we had to look at improving our team a different way, because he's not going to be coming back in that time period.
You've been working on kind of the 2 tracks all year, right? And
right.
When was the determination made that you could work with his money? Like,
Just the last day. I mean, really, we made that decision, and that's why. Fortunately, these trades that we were discussing didn't have to be executed last week, because if so, then we wouldn't have been able to. But some trades were made before, but we wouldn't have been able to do that because we didn't have the information. We waited as long as we could to where we said, like, we need an answer. Is he going to be ready or not?
And just one quick one on Tread Frederick. Do you have any idea when he can play? When are you expecting him to make his Oilers debut?
No, and we haven't talked about Trent a bit. I do want to talk about him because I think his game is going to translate really well to this, to our team and to the fans here. I think they're going to love watching Freddie play. I've only met him once, and he's got a great personality. He seems to love life. He's one of those guys that's upbeat, optimistic, fun to be around. And when the game starts, he plays to win. He's a very competitive guy, and I think he brings an element we just don't have. He's a lot to handle on the ice. He's a big guy, and he can score too. He can play center. So he's got that flexibility to play in the middle or play up the lineup on the wing. I think timing-wise, it's a couple weeks. I don't really know for sure. He's going to play certainly before April. I just don't know when that will be.
Stan, you make a couple trades leading up to deadline day today, but when you get here this morning, you got about $300,000 in cap space. You have a fair amount of no move and no trade clauses to deal with. You're on the LTIR situation. Did you find, obviously you would need other teams to take your money to make a deal happen. Did you find that you were just maybe too encumbered today to get done what you wanted to do?
No, I think with the cap, there's always ways of, having teams retain like we did in Frederick's deal. We had him cut in half twice. So those are always options. I don't know if it's just trying to find the match of the player and how he's the right player with the right term left that matches up with what you have to offer that team. And some teams aren't looking for prospects. Some teams want a player back. And we're not really in that mode of having a roster player we're trying to add to our group, not really do lateral trades. So some teams we weren't a match for just because our group didn't line up with their group. We were in on a few things with players that ended up going to other teams, and we couldn't have made that trade because they had a player that was expendable that we didn't. So it's always a match of, do you have what the other team is looking for, and then are you willing to pay the price? So there's a couple different reasons deals don't happen. So I don't think we were, handicapped by that. I mean, it's just a challenge. Sure, we didn't have an unlimited budget, but at the same time, I was cognizant of not trying to bring in too many new players. Like, I think that is a fair question, is how many bodies are too many to try to integrate with your group and find that chemistry. You don't want to spend too much time just trying out all kinds of new combinations. You're trying to win games and you're trying to prepare yourself for the playoffs.
Along those lines, big picture strategy. There are those who would say, you're in this window, you have Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl on their, their previous deals here, that you got to be all in every year while you have these guys. What would you say to those who would, ask that question? Did you push enough chips in considering the window you have with these guys? And what's your philosophy about that versus keeping something in the cupboards for the future?
Yeah, I think we're all in to try to win right now. I mean, that's been our focus for sure. We don't have many draft picks this year. We got a couple, which is, it's tough on the amateur scouts, but I understand that that's the price of being a team that's trying to add to their group. So there was no hesitation to trade first round picks or prospects. That wasn't you're not just going to carelessly trade them away. But I think that was a big part of the reason we got Wallman, was we stepped up and gave him a first rounder. And I don't know if they had that from other teams, but I think that's what ultimately got it done for us, is we didn't mess around and try to get too cute with it. We saw a player we valued and we went out and got him. So first round picks are valuable, but players are even more valuable for where we are. So we were aggressive on that front.
Do you view your strategy this year to have been fairly aggressive?
Yes, definitely. Yep.
Stan, on a day like this, how focused are you on your targets and not paying attention to what else is going on, or the stuff that happens in your conference, does that weigh at all into influencing you guys to try and do something?
I think you're more focused on making your team as good as it can be, rather than just trying to react to what other teams do. Because at the end of the day, there's different ways to win, and you have certain strengths as a team already, and you're trying to either accentuate those strengths, or you're trying to figure out the areas where you're weak and to try to, fortify that. So, of course, you notice what other teams are doing, but I don't think you can try to react and make moves just to make moves because another team did. Whenever you're playing a team in a playoff series, first and foremost, you have to be playing great yourself. And if you're playing great and you're not winning, then you maybe need to be super focused on how to beat your opponent. But you're not going to beat these teams in the playoffs if you're not playing well. So it's really get our group to play. We've got some amazing players here, and we've got to do what we can to make sure that everyone around them is at the top of their game, and because then when you add that all up, we're going to be a tough team to beat.
Clearly, from where he was in the playoffs last year to the way this year has gone for him, there's been a step back. What are you seeing? Are there conversations to be had there, and how confident are you he'll find that level again?
Yeah, I mean, Bush seems to get a lot of talk about him. I think partially it's a sign of how good he is, because he's got 11 goals, and you'd think he hasn't scored this year. He got the winning goal last night in overtime. Like I guess the bar is high for him, right? And I think anytime he does struggle in a game or has a play that doesn't work out, it gets highlighted, and I get it. That's the way it works. But I think he hasn't been on the top of his game. I think that's fair to say. But he's still a really good player. He does a lot of good things for us. I mean, you try not to look at the things that maybe stick out in your mind, but just look at sort of his underlying performance for this season. And if you do that, he's got tremendous performance this year. He does a lot of things really well. But he can play better, and we want him to, and I know he wants to, but he's still playing pretty good. I think that he does get a lot of attention. And like I said, I think for the amount of talk there is, you'd think he just scored his first goal last night, but he's doing pretty good.
Stan, sorry to go back a little bit here, but I know when you didn't match the two offer sheets in August that you did, part of the reason for that was you wanted to have some flexibility going forward here. Do you feel like you maximized that flexibility in the last few days here?
Well, I think all you can really do is deal with the information you have at the time. So at the time, Evander was not going to have this setback, and would have been a different decision if you knew that he wasn't going to play this year, right? But so it's a little bit of rewriting history. So I think given where we are and the players that we've added, through that whole process, Emberson and Podkolzin have been really good players for us. Like, I think they've come in, and I would say they've certainly exceeded my expectations for how they're going to incorporate into our group. They're two young guys. We are an older team, so to have them come in and look like they're going to be parts of our future, I think is a positive thing. So, and in particular, the most recent couple moves we made, I think, we got guys that aren't older. I mean, they're not like 2021, but they're on the younger side of additions to a team at the deadline, and I think that's going to bode well for us.
So you talked about not hesitating, giving up on first rounders, but what's the asset management going to look like come 2027?
Boy, that's a tough one to predict. 2 years out, I think there's a lot that changes over a 6-month period or a year. 2 years out, we certainly have our staff whose part of their job is to be looking 2 and 3 years down the road, and I love that about the group we have here on the analytics side, on the scouting side. They're spending their time really giving me options and different scenarios that we might have to look into down the road. So you're constantly balancing the present with the future. So I don't want to give the impression that the future doesn't matter, but I think if you're trying to decide between the two, we're clearly not a team that's looking to build and be better like 3 years from now relative to now. I think now the present is what matters with this group, and I think there's a lot of ways to maintain that, though, over time. If we do our job in our scouting and our player development side and our analytics, even though we don't have as many assets as some of these other teams, I think we can still be competitive and be a team that can maintain that level for years to come.
Were Savoy and O'Reilly two players you were pretty confident you wanted to hold on to?
Yeah, I think they've both had tremendous seasons. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about Matt because he was up here and he played some games for us. Really impressed with his progression from training camp to where he was a week ago. And just to see his growth as a player, I think the whole idea of sending him down to Bakersfield early was to give him minutes and give him a role that he was not going to have in Edmonton. He wouldn't play 20 minutes a game up here, so he wouldn't have the opportunity to grow as a player. And I think what he needed, he was a great player last year in junior. He scored a ton, played a ton. And then when you step up to be a pro, you still need to play a lot if you want to grow as a player, but it's harder. Your opponents are all much better than they were a year ago. You're playing against, people in their 30s, so there's the strength issue. But he had a great attitude. He embraced being in Bakersfield. Like, he never complained. He wasn't sour about being there. He really embraced the penalty kill role, which I think was important to, looking at our team here. Matt's always been a power play player. He's probably not going to be on our power play, certainly not right now, even if he's here. So how can he contribute? Well, that's why we had him being on the penalty kill there, and he was great at it. He didn't have a lot of experience at that before, but he's blocking shots. He's out there late in games to protect the lead. So his game really grew, and he's a much better player. So I think he's a guy that's going to be a factor for us for many years. I love his attitude, and I think he's just going to keep improving. And Sam is obviously still in junior, but he's had a great year as well. Our development group deserves a lot of credit. They've put in a lot of time with Sam. Really impressed with his ability to impact the game in a couple different ways. Like, he's not just an offensive player. I mean, he's got good numbers, but he doesn't even get that many offensive looks. He's on a really good team there. So he probably doesn't get featured as much as he would, but sort of the other aspects of his game have really grown too. So very encouraging to see where he is after just 1 year of development, and I'm excited to keep working with him.
One last thing for me. Did you take a swing at Rantanen or Marchand?
I thought I might get that question. We took a swing at a lot of things. I don't want to comment specifically on those players, but I'll say that we were aggressive trying to make things happen, but obviously none of those did.